Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Morning.
People are slowly trickling in, so we'll just let them do that while we start. Happy snow day.
Yes.
I hope you're at home and cozy and didn't have to go clean off a car this morning. I'm really, really grateful. I just got an indoor parking spot a couple months ago. Well, I'm going to get started because we've got a lot of good stuff to talk about. If people want to pop in late, that's their prerogative. So we've been talking about the One Thing book, and I've been using that as reference. So if you don't already have this book, it's definitely worth getting. I see Kevin had to shovel. See, man, condo life. It's the way to go. So I've been using the One Thing for the different topics we've been talking about, but I've come across several questions lately, and maybe you have this question too, from people who want to know more about like, okay, this happens, now what do I do? So like, I have a new buyer, what are the things I should have in place for them? I have a new listing, what should I have in place for that? I want to make sure I'm profitable this year. How do I do that? All of that stuff comes back to systems and models. So if you have the One Thing, or pardon me, have the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book, how many of you guys have this? Just like put it in the comments. I want to know how many people have this book. All right, cool. This is, if you don't already have this, this is like the book to have to figure out how to be a successful real estate agent. How many of you have actually read it or part of it and don't just own it?
I read it.
Cool. All right, cool. So some people have it, some people have read it. One of the things I come back to, well, I come back to this book more than once, all the time, actually, just like checking in, is my business on course? What am I not thinking about? But one of the big things in here that I think is so important are the models. So there's a picture in here of like a shack that's falling over, and then there's a very strong brick building. And the point is, if you have a strong foundation of models, you will build a strong business, right? If you start to take off, if you start to get lots of business, you start to get a bunch of clients, and you don't have systems and models in place, that will very quickly topple over, right? Has anybody gotten to that point where you've had like maybe just a couple of people under contract at once, or you've got a few people looking, and suddenly you're feeling overwhelmed? It'll happen sooner than you think. And once it does, it's going to feel very messy. And to make sure that you're not having those like panicked wake up in the middle of the night moments where you're like, oh no, I forgot this. Oh shoot, what's happening with that? Having some just basic systems in place to start with will make a big difference for you, your sanity, your clients, how well you care for them, and just how your business runs. Now, I know that for me, when I started, one of the hardest things was figuring out what systems to put in place because I hadn't done any business yet, right? Mm-hmm. Like, how do you know what to expect as a buyer if you haven't walked somebody through that process? Now, if you've bought your own home recently, you may have some more reference for that. But understanding the realtor side of things is a little different. And so it's good to have systems in place for that. Now, when it comes to what's in the MREA, there's a diagram on page 122 that has those 4 systems laid out. So, or pardon me, the 4 models. So the 4 models are, 1, the economic model. So the economic model is kind of what we talked about recently, where you're looking at what numbers do I need to hit? So how many happy clients do I need to help in the year? And what is my volume or the total dollars of real estate I'm selling need to look like to get me to the gross commission income I'm hoping to have? And more importantly, the net income after my split with Keller Williams, after I pay into my team if I'm on a team, after my expenses, what I'm looking to have as the actual money in my bank at the end of the year, or, looking at it backwards to the end of the year, how can I build that out backwards? So looking at those numbers, breaking them down by the number of appointments you need to have, as well as the number of contacts you need to have. And that is your economic model. That is bringing money into your business and having a system, a model in place to understand how to get yourself there step by step. So we've talked about that, right? The second model is the lead generation model. Now, we talk a lot about lead generation or lead gen, connecting with people to help build your pipeline, the number of people you have contacts with, and ultimately the number of clients you're working with, right? So this is people who want to work with you or maybe will send people your way. So having a lead generation model in place is huge, right? Because if you don't have people, you don't have business. So that's your prospecting. It's your marketing of yourself. It's your marketing of any property you have listed, which may also bring you buyers or potentially sellers. Setting up your database. So that's in our top 5, right? Were you guys all in the meeting last Thursday for the launch program? So we talked about the top 5. And one of the most important things in there is having at least 100 contacts in command. So that's your database. That's your people's names, phone numbers, email addresses, and ideally their home addresses as well. So getting all that information in there so that you can reach out to them in different ways, right? You can set them up on a 33 touch. You can send handwritten notes, make phone calls. Setting up a model and using proven models like 33 touch, which are built into command, can make that so much easier than trying to reinvent the wheel, right? When I started, I didn't have that specific of systems in front of me. So I had to seek them out. I had to find books that had some ideas of how to do that. I found something called ninja selling. It has a lot of similarities to the MREA, right? At the end of the day, there's no new magical fix. There's no new way to reach people, really. It all is the same stuff. So having that system in place is huge. And focusing on listings taken. So we know that listings, especially in Wisconsin, bring you a higher percentage of commission. They also are something that bring you buyers. And in theory, you're not running around as much with listings, so you can handle more in theory, though there's more to that story. So that's the lead generation model. Number 3 is the budget model. This is so important. Did anybody go to Mega Camp or watch Mega Camp last year? So when I first started with Keller Williams, I went to Mega Camp. It's crazy. I can't wait till we can do these things in person again. It's huge. And they put these people on stage who have these giant businesses, and their GCI is like in the millions, and they're selling thousands of homes. They have these huge teams. It's very impressive. But what we discovered, and what Gary Keller discovered, is he was putting people on stage who were bringing in a lot of money, but their budget model was a mess. And they weren't actually netting hardly anything compared to what they were bringing in. So you can work your tail off to get as much business as possible. You can have your name in the top 10 in the meetings and look like a hot shot. But if you can't manage your money within your business, it does not matter. You're working really hard to have this much percentage of this much that you're bringing in if you can't manage the money within that budget model. And if you can't handle that, then find somebody who can and leverage that, right? Have that person working on your behalf. Really big. The 4th one is the organization model. And this is something that when you're new, maybe doesn't make sense to start out right away. It depends. If you decide to join a team, you kind of lock into an organizational model. If you're working on your own, you think you want to eventually have somebody join you. That may be the first step towards having a team, is having an administrative person, even if they're part-time, or hiring someone like Renee. But having that organizational model in place, you work until you're maxed out, and then you bring somebody in to try to help you. So those are the 4 base models of the MREA. Those are the things we talk about all the time, right? So there's more to it than just that, right? If you have all those things in place, you can do quite well. But when it comes down to it, does any of that give you what you need to help somebody buy a property or to help somebody sell a property, right? To set a buyer up for success and understanding what to expect from the process and the market, to make your days easier by setting some things in place to make those steps in the process happen smoothly, predictably, regularly, without missing or forgetting anything, right? There's more to it than just these 4 models. These are your base, but there's more that you need to be responsible for, right? So that's what I want to talk about, is these systems that I've put in place myself, that I've gotten ideas from other agents, other books, some of what's in MREA and the One Thing. But what I want to know from you is, what kinds of systems are you struggling with? What are the things that you're not quite sure? What's step 1, 2, 3, and 4 when it comes to an open house, when it comes to setting up a buyer agency meeting or a consultation, going through a showing, how does that typically go? These are all systems. These are all things you set in place in your mind, on paper, however you can get it so that this is what's going to be happening. And then when it happens, it's not a reaction, it's proactive, right? You can set your clients up to know what to expect because you know what's coming. And you can very smoothly work through the process and know where everyone's at because you've got these systems in place. So tell me, what are some things that you're feeling like you're struggling with when it comes to having a system in place, or you just haven't gotten there yet and you're like, man, I probably need something to make sure this runs smoothly?
I mean, I'm not at the point where I'm juggling too many clients that I can't, keep things straight. So what I've been doing is just like in notes on my phone, I will, make like the checklist of, send this email, check in on that, do all those things. And then I'll also, but I'm more wondering, I guess, once you have many people, is like working the notes the best way to do it still? Or do you have a better way to like keep track of everything?
Yeah, that's a great question, Benji. So once you have a few clients under contract, especially, then there's like many other people involved, right? You've got the lender, you've got the title company, you've got the co-broke, your buyer, seller, the other party. And it is easy for some of those small things to slip through the cracks. And there's also going to be things when you're new that pop up and you're like, title sent me a thing. What do I do with this? So there's going to be stuff like that, right? Now, there are checklists that are somewhat helpful. Kimmy has a checklist that is for, the documents you need to have in command and kind of the things required for compliance. That's a good clue as far as like what's coming. When it comes to tracking where people are in the process, when I was a solo agent, I had a chart. I just made like a spreadsheet, and I had every step of the process. And then I would just plug in a date or an update to where I was. And I would check that and make sure it was filled in correctly on Mondays and on Thursdays. And the reason for that is after the weekend, I would have, things that had happened and I could update it on Monday. And then Thursday, because if there was anything that was due or required a lender or a title company, I could have that done, or at least know I needed to get to it before Friday when those places close or people are on half days and stuff like that. So for me, that was a good system to have while I was solo, that I could just monitor and also easily reference where everyone was at in the process.
Amanda, that's something
yeah.
you'd be able to share with us. Do you still have that spreadsheet?
I might. That was 4 computers ago, but I'll see
Okay,
if I
no
can
problem.
find it. I destroyed a couple of computers in a row on accident. Very mobile office, not always so great on computers. But it's pretty straightforward. It's all the basics. It's, do I have a buyer agency? When it's a buyer, do we have buyer agency signed? Do I have a pre-approval? do we, well, when it's early on, even before buyer agency, did we have a consultation? You know, if we set up that consultation, do we have buyer agency? Do we have a pre-approval? Once you have an accepted offer, have I sent the offer to the lender? Have I sent the signed offer to the buyer? I usually send them together, you know, let them know, hey, is it cool if I send this to your lender? I'll copy you on it. Then everybody knows it got to the right place. The inspection, have we scheduled inspection? Do they have instructions for earnest money? Do I have the earnest money receipt? Have I sent that to the lender? So it's a lot of those like seemingly small things that are all super important. Granted, if you're new, this is going to happen. There will probably be something that you don't know is coming. And then somebody in the process will be like, hey, I need that thing. So especially the lender or title company, and sometimes you're co-broke, but having those things lined up can be really helpful. And when you first do it, it's going to be a really long list, right? Like it's all new and you're just trying it out. So I would put those items, like stacking them on the side, and then make the columns per client, because otherwise you're going to have this super long spreadsheet, right? So however you want to check that off. Back in the day, people would have files, paper files. Some people still do. Benji, I know you work with Katie. She had paper files a long time. So if that works for you, great. It's not real mobile and it's not something you can check easily, but some people, you know, some agents in the past have had paper folders and there's a page on top and it has all the information about what's going on with that person. Can you do a digital version of that? Sure. Can you keep that in your notes on your phone? Sure. Put it somewhere where you can also save it in a second spot in case something happens. So when I would do my updates weekly, I would just email it to myself also. And that way, if something happened to the initial document, I still had a saved copy of what was updated. If you do it in Google Docs, you can check it on your phone and your computer, something cloud-based, that can be really nice too. So having that breakdown, not only is that a good way to stay organized, it also forces you to really make sure you understand all the steps in the process, right? Like if you're going along and you're like, what happens next? It's why I don't fully regret not having something just handed to me. It was an opportunity for me to learn because I had to really make sure I wasn't missing anything. And the next step to me making sure I really understood it was that I had to teach it to my clients. And when you have to teach something, you really have to get it, right? You have to understand it and you have to be ready for questions. So putting that together was a worthwhile project goal for me. It was definitely something worth blocking time in my calendar for. It was definitely something I considered a thinking time, kind of set aside time where I'm uninterrupted, because I could really think through the process and I could make note of the stuff I wasn't sure about. Then I could go back and talk to a lender I know. I could go back and talk to a title company I work with. I could ask a trusted agent just to make sure I wasn't missing anything. And that really helped me. And that kind of developed over time. Now, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are checklists out there. And using command alone, just looking at what documents are required and making sure that your compliance is lined up, that's going to give you a good indication of the documents you need. But that was just a simple, helpful thing that I could do. The biggest thing is keeping it updated. So for me, I was like, oh, I'll just update it as I go. No big deal. I got like 3 people. No big deal. Going along. Then I get 2 more under contract. And I'm like, oh, geez, I can't keep these updates. I'm like running around. I got contract. I'm trying to remember stuff. I'm trying to not look like an idiot. I got to like eat at some point, right? Like you start to run out of time. So just setting a time and place where I knew I was going to go over that document and make sure it was updated helped me not worry constantly about missing stuff. If I had those accountability points in my day or my week, that kept me from worrying too much about it. Now I have an assistant who is a master of spreadsheets and organization, and she has taken that over for me. So we have a team meeting on Mondays, and then I do a check-in with her on Fridays. And she is tracking all of that stuff. She actually keeps a team record in just a Google Doc where it's like, okay, where are we with this person? Where are we with this person? But then she has charts and checklists that she works off of for everybody. So it's the same thing. I just have somebody else doing it who's even better than I am at it and enjoys doing that and holds me accountable to it. But it's the same thing. So it's kind of a simple system, but it makes a big difference so that you're not worried about missing anything, because that can become a costly mistake for your client and potentially ultimately for you, right? Like you don't want to have to pay for something that you weren't planning on paying for. So yeah, good question, Benji. It's a simple way to approach it, but I found that it worked for me. I was able to handle, up until 2019, I was doing all my contract to close myself. I think I maxed out at 45 people total. So I had 15 running under contract at once was the highest I could take on. It's not a healthy way to approach your business, I will admit, but I could manage it with that. So you can handle 10 at a time for sure.
Thanks.
To me, a
You're
real
welcome.
question, Amanda, is how do you handle email when you have 15 clients going at once, and plus all the KW email, plus all the other national and state email that you get?
So I have folders in my email. I use Gmail. I have folders in my email for every client, and I only check my email 3 times a day. If I constantly checked my email, which I do fall into, that's a habit I fall into, and it's just dizzying. It's like an hour goes by and I'm like, did I get anything done? I'm just like frantically looking through emails. So what I do is I check it after my important projects for the morning. So like 9 a.m., 9:30. I check it after lunch, and I check it kind of at the end of my business, like my office work day before I'm on appointments. So that tends to be around like 3 or 4. And this, these scoot around a little bit depending on the day, what I have scheduled. If I'm expecting documents or I'm in the middle of an email conversation with somebody, I may pop in more often, but I'm only going in for that thing. The whole like deleting and sorting and blah, 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 I do that during those 3 times. Just having specific email times helps that feel less crazy. And then again, at the end of the week, I would go through and is there anything I haven't filed yet? What's all this stuff I have with a star or a flag on it? Do I need all that stuff? But trying to get it into those folders is important, because if at some point you had a client come back and have an issue with something, or a co-broke bring something up, you can just go to that file and then look through emails that way. This is another thing that my assistant now does. So Liz monitors my email. She files stuff for me. If I don't want her to file it, I star it or flag it, and then she puts everything else in files. So, but same concept, setting aside time, having a system in place. At these times, I will be checking email. And at these times during the week, I'm going to be making sure everything's filed. And there you can set up autofile where it like flags emails from a certain person, or if they're named something, they can automatically go into a file. I don't like that because I want to make sure I see everything, but that's an option. Just remember, your email is everybody else's to-do list. If you start your day with that, you will lose that prime time to work on what's most important. So it's why I don't check it first thing in the morning. I set people up though, and I set the expectation. If they need to reach me, if they need to get a hold of me about something that requires immediate response, they should text me or call me. And that otherwise I check my email 3 times a day.
So that takes care of the email for the clients, but like, what about all the other 90 or 80% of emails that you get? Do you have a clean inbox, or do you let it pile up to the thousands?
Well, like I said, I have Liz monitoring my email. If the other stuff, if it's stuff I don't need, I immediately unsubscribe. Your email's out there. The more you're in business, the more it's out there. You're going to get all kinds of stuff, right? It's do this training program, and we have this lead generation thing for you, and improve your Yelp account and pay for Zillow leads and all that junk. Just unsubscribe. Get rid of it.
That's helpful.
And if it's Keller Williams stuff and you're like, I don't have time to read this right now, set aside one day during the week when you read that stuff. You know, some of it's just junk though. And you'll start to learn like, oh, I know where that's from. I can delete that. If you can't unsubscribe for some reason, or you want to know when that stuff pops up. Yeah, it can get out of control. And honestly, there was a point where my email had thousands of emails in it. And I was like, not my most important thing right now. I will get to it later. And then I just increased Liz's hours and had her fix it.
I'd hire Liz just for that.
What about other systems, guys? Or other processes you've been through where you're like, I don't really know what to do to get this put together, or I'm having a hard time managing this part of my business. It can be very basic.
Actually, right now, I'm currently just trying to not necessarily prioritize clients, but like prioritize where they're at. Like, oh, you know, down the road, we'll be looking for this, but then you have like, well, if I find something, you know, yesterday, I'll go for it. So like kind of getting them more sped up, and as opposed to, you know, like maybe just like a every other week email to the other people, just to kind of just, you know, keep in their head that, you know, that we should be working together kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a good one, Grady. This time of year, especially, I find that to be true. I have a giant pipeline, but not everybody wants to buy right now, right? Or not everybody wants to sell right now. And how do you keep track of those people and not forget about them is super important, right? Because if you trail off, they may wander into an open house or find a different agent. So that's a great question. What I find, there's a couple of things I do that I find to be very helpful. One, every day I'm checking the hot sheet. Does everybody know what the hot sheet is? Anybody who doesn't? Okay, so in MLS, and you can get the app for your phone, which I highly recommend. It's one of the systems I rely on, is having apps on my phone for this stuff. There is an option at the bottom of the app that's a cool little flame, and it's the hot sheet. You can also find it on the PC version. But if you go in there, you can set it up. So what I found is on the computer, I can only set it up to like the last 24 hours, I think. On the phone, on my app, I can set it up to 3 days, the past 3 days. And you can put in there like different counties, which is what I just put the 5 counties that I cover. And that's kind of standard what I check in there. You can check certain cities, however you want to do it. But I make it pretty broad because my intention is to go in there and to look for anything that anybody might be interested in. So I've got my list of people and I'm going through and I'm checking to see what's newly listed. Also, there's coming soon listings or delayed listings in there. There's back on market and there's price changes. So they're categorized this way. So you can go through, you can organize it from, you know, high to low price point or however you want to do it. But going through that every day, I send listings to people directly. And what I do, I tell them, I kind of warn them, I'm going to text you these. So I just go in, you can go to share, you can go to other, I think, and then you can just type in whatever email or phone number you want to text it to or email it to. And I just put a little note. Hey, I just saw this, thought of you, or like, oh my gosh, check out this kitchen. Because even if they've been like kind of on the wayside for a while, or they don't seem very motivated, or you talk to them and they still don't have their dang pre-approval, sending them a property is motivating, right? It's fun. Who doesn't want to look at a new listing? So if you send them something like that, it will start a conversation. So it's why I text them to people, because most of the people I work with are texting people. So they text me back. You know, you could email it as well. It doesn't tell you when they open it if you go that route, but it's something worth following up about, right? And it's very innocent, you know. Oh, I just knew you'd love this patio, so I had to send it. You don't have to be like, hey, you should buy this. Hey, want to go on a showing? Hey, where's your pre-approval? You can just say like, check this out. It's great. One of my mentors when I first started had been my agent when we were trying to buy a house, and we were like looky-loos forever. We were the most obnoxious buyers. We just didn't know what we wanted. We didn't have a lot of money. And she would just out of the blue, like send me a cool house. And then I'd be like, oh man, we should probably get our pre-approval figured out. You know, like it's just a trigger for people. As far as keeping track of those people, I don't know if you guys have popped your head in my office before. I have a super rudimentary way that I do this. I also have it in Command. So in Command, you can track your leads. You can track when you're contacting them and what you said. It is stellar. But I'm such an analog person too, that I use Command, and then in conjunction with it, I use a little board of Post-it notes. I know Annie Jerzyk does this too, or something to that effect. But if you feel free to poke your head in my office, it's the one with the glass door by the printer. But I have a board, actually have picture frames, and I've got Post-its all over it. They're green and they're pink. Pink are buyers, green are sellers, and I have them in columns organized by where they are in the process. So on the right-hand side, I have under contracts. Then the next column is active. The next column is people I've met with who I have a contract with but are on pause, because Lord knows in this market that happens. People who I've met with but we don't have contracts signed yet. And then people who I'm scheduling meetings with. Then I've got all my backup people. So at the end of the year, looking forward to the next year, I rearrange all those Post-its to figure out who's like, you know, thinking first quarter, who's thinking later. And if I haven't checked in with them in a while, I send out an email. Hey, just wanted to find out if you're still thinking of buying a house in June. Hey, checking in to see if you still want to sell that condo next spring. Whatever it is. And I kind of organize based on those responses. It's also a perfect excuse to reach out to them. I have somebody who's under contract right now. We just got an offer accepted last week. I met them 2 years ago, and I've been in touch a little bit here and there. And then last year, we sent out an email just checking in to see if they were still thinking of buying. And they really appreciated us reaching out, but they weren't ready yet. And then when they called me out of the blue, they were on my list. I was like, I've got to get to these people, but I haven't yet. And then they reached out to me and said, you know, it was so sweet that you contacted us last year. It was just nice to know you were still thinking about us, but now we're ready. So it can get to be a little overwhelming when you have a big list. But again, having a system in place. Okay, I have a place where I have these listed. Right now, as my like shorthand quick reference, I have all my people in my planner. So these are like my active people. These are upcoming for the year. These are some down the line. And the reason I do that also is because of my economic model. I'm tracking to see how many potential clients do I have for this year, right? So my team, we're going to sell 100 homes this year. That's 60 is my responsibility. So my pipeline should have approximately 60 people in it, or darn close to it at the beginning of the year. And then it's all going to shuffle out from there. And some of them are long shots. You just have to know not every egg's going to hatch, right? Like some of these are going to be things that don't work out for one reason or another. The more people you have in your pipeline, the less dramatic that is, right? The less devastating it is if something doesn't work out. And the less desperate you seem, because you know you have a strong pipeline of people coming in. This is why having a lead generation model is so important. So once people start to flow in, it's a matter of not forgetting about them and having something in place to follow up with them. So getting them on something like a 33 touch, even just getting them on some kind of regular email check-in, or having a system you set in place where you're checking the hot sheet every day and reaching out to them. Maybe you, have something you do weekly where you're going through, like we're doing productivity right now, you're going through letters of the alphabet. Go back to that list of potential clients and reach out to them directly. So there's a number of ways you can do that and track it. It's so nicely organized in Command, and it's so cool that you can track all the times you've contacted them in there. If the challenge to you is updating Command, then just do that weekly or daily or bi-weekly. Just plot it in your calendar. this is when this happens. Because what you're going to find is you can't control everything that happens in your day, especially in real estate, right? Like house pops up, we got to go. Well, shoot, I was supposed to do this or that, right? So blocking times out and having a little bit of flexibility with that is really important. And when you get to the point where you just can't keep up with these things, it's time to hire somebody. It's time to get a very part-time helper. It's time to have Renee do your contract to close, or, you know, there are many options, but I will say from experience, don't wait until you're drowning and have burned out 5 times to get somebody to help you. That's what I did. Don't do what I did. It did not help. It totally stagnated my business. It took me longer to get where I am. It was painful. It did not help my relationships or my self-care or any of that stuff. So if you can get some of these things in place yourself, great. Then it would be easy to pass on to someone else to do that work for you, even if it's 5 hours a week. And if you're like, this is so not my jam, I cannot figure this out, well, then maybe you need someone who is organized to jump on and help you figure that stuff out. But it can be that simple. It can just be as easy as like, I'm not going to keep a chart, but I'm going to keep a running list in my mind. I'm going to keep, you know, people in command. I'm going to, you know, when I interview people in a buyer consultation, I ask them about what they're looking for in a home. And part of my system for that is I send them a chart before we meet called needs, wants, and wishes. And needs, wants, and wishes are everything they're looking for in a home. And I do ask them to also include why these things are important. And then I divide it up by location, size, condition, and features. And they fill that chart out almost every time before we meet. I send it out, you know, depending on how long we have before we meet. They usually have at least a day to fill it out, and they almost always do. Then I ask for a copy of it. They can handwrite it and take a picture. They can fill it out as a Google Doc, whatever they want to do. However, they're going to write their list of things they're looking for. I save that and it goes into Command. So it's a reference for me. I also take a picture on my phone so I can quick reference it on my phone. So when I am going through the hot sheet, I can go back to that. Now for me, I can keep a lot of people in my head. I have a memory for that. So for a while, when Joan Reed, if you haven't met her yet, she's now on our team, yay. She would ask me like, how do you keep track of all this stuff? And I could just keep it in my head. It's just one of those things that I could, but if you can't, like, just have a reference. So as you're going through the hot sheet, you can go back and say like, oh yeah, this would be really great for these guys, but did they care about air conditioning? Did they need a 2-car garage? Does it matter if the second bedroom's on a different floor? You know, stuff like that. You can reference that. You don't have to make it hard for yourself. Just have something in place to simplify it. So yeah, Betsy, virtual assistant's another great way to go. I know Tony Spott used to use one. So that would be, you know, some examples of some simple things you can do to not let people slip through the cracks. And, you know, when in doubt, just give yourself some time once a week or once a month to go back and check and see like who you have coming up. And if business slows down, go back to that list, right? Oh my gosh, I need appointments. The only way I'm going to get business rolling is appointments. Well, I have warm leads, or at least lukewarm leads, right? They're on this list. I need to go back to these people and see where they're at. And sending them properties, I find to be one of the easiest ways to get a response. So, or sending them like a picture of something I saw in a house, stuff like that, where it's conversational, it's fun, it's engaging, it's not super serious, and you're not badgering them about whether they want to buy a house or get their pre-approval or whatever, you know, set up their listing appointment, those sorts of things. Good question, Grady. What else, guys? How are you setting up your systems? Have you found things that work? I mean, it's a lot to juggle, especially if you're a solo agent. So like, how do you do it? What do you do once you get a few people under contract or you have a few people looking at the same time? Like, what do you do? Do you just wait until they send you a house, or do you proactively reach out to people?
I mean, we've been getting people set up on the MLS portal. So like after doing that buyer consult, sending like a big summary email has been working really well. That kind of outlines the needs, the wants, preferreds versus, necessities, and making sure that you set them up on the right search parameters and kind of confirming that with them.
Cool. That's great. Using that subscription in MLS can be very a nice tool to use in conjunction with something else. I think too often I find agents who just set people on that subscription and forget about them. And then they work with me. Well, I never signed a buyer agency. Well, I still get these emails from this lady, but I've never heard from her. And she just sends them to me. Okay, well, that's not fully servicing your client, right? So getting them set up on that, Benji, sending out a follow-up email is really good. Follow-up and checking in, letting people know you're there for them, you're thinking about them, and what to expect from the next steps is key. Saying we're a team here, we're working together, here's what we need to do next. One of the things I'm honestly terrible at, but I intend to do better, is when I have my buyer consultations, when I'm doing a great job, I set up the buyer agency before we meet. And then all I have to do is fill in a couple of things after we meet. And then I send it out immediately following that meeting. Or if we're meeting in person, when that happens again, I will bring it with me, digital or potentially print it out. And we'll talk about it. And then I'll have them sign it there. That's if people are comfortable with that, for you to say like, great, let's sign now. Same thing with a listing appointment, right? Like, I can always tear this up. We can always cancel it. If you're game, let's do it. Read your audience on how pushy that may come off, but it certainly is effective. If you can get them signed on right away, then they have an obligation to you. You have an obligation to them. It's very clear. So having something that follow up or how you kind of move them into the next phase from a buyer consult is great, Benji. That's awesome. I also recommend setting it up so that you get notified when they open emails in MLS. And that way you don't have to tell them that they are alerting you. You can just wait till it pops up and then say, oh, hey, I was just thinking about you. Did you blah, blah, blah? Or like, hey, I was just thinking about you. Did you see this house? It doesn't matter if they just got the subscription update. Just check in with them and they'll be like, oh my God, I was just looking at houses. This is so great. How convenient. It's like what they're thinking about right now. And you get a notice. And if it works out that you're available, reach out, take advantage of that. I see no problem with that. You're available to help them with what they're looking for when they're looking at it. And maybe it's them opening it and deleting it and hoping they could unsubscribe. And maybe then they save you the trouble of wondering what's going on with them, right? Actually, we're not going to look for a while. Would you mind taking me off that list? No problem. It's a win-win. So it's definitely worth having that little alert on there too. And you can do that, hot sheet checking in conjunction with a subscription. The more opportunities you have to touch base with somebody, the more they think you're doing a great job for them. The more opportunity you have to find a property, which we know right now goes like in a day. So the more you're on it and they're on it, with this market and with everybody's access to information, I usually tell my buyers, this is a group project, right? This is a team effort. I'm sending you things. I'm finding out about off-market properties. I'm looking at what's upcoming. I'm checking the hot sheet. I'm sending you things. But also, if you find something, send it my way. Here's how to do it. This is the system. Text me the address. I will get more details, send them to you, and we can set up a showing. That works for me because I know it's so time sensitive. Having them email me doesn't make sense. I'm not on there all day. So all those little things can really simplify how you do your business. And it makes you seem experienced. It makes you seem like a polished professional because you have systems in place. This happens. Oh, sure. Okay, so here's how I do this. This happens. Okay, here's our next steps, right? It's never like, I want to see this house. And you're like, okay, what do we do? Well, let me see if this, right? Everything takes longer. It feels kind of clunky. And when somebody's trusting you with this huge investment, the more smooth, confident, in control you seem, the more they relax, the smoother, the better the process, right? We want this to be as painless as possible. When I'm done working with somebody on their transaction, looking forward to the next time we work together, my best compliment is when they say things like, gosh, that was so easy, or that went so smooth, or it happened so fast. Like they just barely had to feel it, you know? That's what I want. I want it to be seamless. I come from a fine dining background, and the beauty of that kind of service is that you are whisked off to your table. It is painless. Beautiful things come out in front of you. You have an enjoyable experience. And at the end, you're satisfied and full and relaxed. And it's been lovely. And you've never had to ask for a refill of your water or another fork or whatever. You go to the bathroom, your napkin's folded on your table when you come back. That's what I'm going for. And being proactive, having systems in place, knowing what happens next makes that so much easier. So much easier. Yeah. And that's, Grady, going back to your question too, that having, being able to keep track of people, for anyone who's been in service industry, the way I look at my upcoming and current clients is as if I'm serving tables and they're in my section. So I've got people in the waiting room. I've got people who've checked in, but they're waiting for another guest. I have people who've ordered drinks, people who've ordered their entrees, some people on dessert. They have their check. They haven't paid yet. It's the same system in my head. It's, however it makes sense for you to kind of keeping track of where people are at. But that's, have I checked in with that table in a while? Oh, shoot, I have not. I should make sure they're okay. Cool.
That's
Anybody
awesome.
else?
Yeah, been there. Definitely been there. Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
No,
if that's, go ahead.
Sorry, not to cut you off, but to kind of piggyback off Benji, as far as like setting up MLS searches, I've also been using that more so to like use that as leverage to almost broaden their searches, not to like talk them out of exactly what they want, but like, hey, if you do have to bite the bullet and actually have like a full second bathroom instead of a half, it might be, in your best interest. You see, there's only 15 active properties. This may get you to 30 kind of thing. That's the thing with the 3 people that I have currently, that's what I've been trying to, not necessarily that there's no homes for them, but that it just gives them like a broader search, like a chance to find something maybe that they weren't looking for that might be perfect for them.
That's a great point, Grady. And that's another good thing to set expectations for. It's something that I talk about in my buyer consult as well. If you've ever heard the term buyers are liars, I hate that, but especially old school agents will say that all the time. And the reason they're saying that, does anybody know?
Because
Benji
buyers
knows.
don't ever know what they want.
So here's the thing. Buyers know what they want, but at the top of their budget, they want everything they can get. At the bottom of their budget, they're willing to be flexible. And their prime location, they must have at least 1 bathroom. In a not so prime location, they've got to have 2, right? There's so many factors. It's just like anything you're buying, right? Do I clearance rack like this shirt, or do I full price like this shirt? It's the same thing, right? So understanding that need versus want or wish, and what's flexible, why that's a need. Maybe it's not as much of a need. Maybe they plan to have kids in a few years and then they need 2 full bathrooms. Well, can we find a half bath that could be expanded? So setting up those expectations in your buyer consultation is great. I usually tell people, I'm here to try to help you find the best fit. And that means in a low inventory market, I'm going outside of your parameters. We're casting a bigger net. And so I'm telling you, I'm hearing you. I understand what your top priorities are, but my role is to push the boundaries a little bit. And it's because I want to help you get clarity on what's most important. This is so much a process of elimination. So I'm going to send you homes, when I'm in the hot sheet, I'm going to send you something and you're going to be like, Amanda, what the heck? This only has a 1-car garage. Yeah, but did you see the kitchen and it has 2 full baths at this price? Maybe that's worth it. So if I tell them in advance that's what I'm going to be doing and that there's a method to my madness, then they understand where I'm coming from and they don't think I'm clueless or not listening to them. So again, setting those expectations is a system, right? Understanding where you're going with things, how you operate, what they can expect, having the confidence in knowing this is how this is going to go is huge. So going a little broader, especially in this market, is a big thing. And if you can do it in person or screen share, you can show people like, okay, I'm in MLS. Here's the search I'm setting up for you. Now, if I only do Wauwatosa instead of surrounding Milwaukee neighborhoods, there are 6 homes for sale in your price point. Now, if I change it and I do this area search, now there's 24. And they're like, oh, shoot. Like, it's very clear to see how much that changes. And it's a really good point. If you have somebody who's insisting on 1 bath or on 2 baths, try 1.5. If they're insisting on a 3-bedroom, try 2, maybe plus 10, especially if it's a condo. So those little things can go a long way too. That's a good point. Anybody else have any systems they've used or things that have come up that they wish they had a system for? Or something they've seen someone else do? Nothing? I'm worried. How are you doing business, guys?
email.
Who's that? Sorry, I cut you off.
I was just saying template emails. I know like Stephanie Minnick on our team has, taught me to save template emails. So it just saves you time and you have a clear, organized way of communicating with all your clients.
That's an awesome idea. We do that for like once your offer is accepted, we send out an email to our client, our co-broke, and then the lender or title company, depending on whether we have the buyers or the sellers. But that's a great idea. Having an email written out thoughtfully, that's grammar and spelling checked, that's been looked at by somebody else, that is very clear and has no attitude to it and is just to the point. And just having that ready to go when something happens in the transaction is so good, right? Rather than sending these short little disjointed crummy emails, people get ideas about people when they get these weird emails, right? So if you have something thoughtful and concise, that's not 40 paragraphs, that's just like to the point, ready to go, then you just go into your email and pull up that template or save it in your notes and copy and paste it into your email and send it off. And then you don't have to be reinventing the wheel every time, especially if it's stuff that you can't remember. You're like, oh wait, who gets that? And what do I call that form? And stuff like that. That's a really excellent idea. Yeah. Having some standards in place can be very good. Same thing when you get like somebody wants to meet with you for a buyer consultation. You can just send off kind of a standard email. Lately, because I've been doing Zoom meetings with people instead of meeting in person, my buyer home guide or my seller listing guide that I send out ahead of time, I have a form email with that and all the PDFs attached. And then I just go in, I pull that up and send it off. So it's right in my phone. No excuse, I can do it quickly. Anybody else have questions about, I know Janine talked about open houses a couple weeks ago, so they kind of walked through the pieces of that, but having those things in place, having a checklist, what documents do I bring with me? What do I do on which day leading up to the open house? All those pieces should be a system. This is just how I do it. Okay, I need this, that, and the other thing. What do I line up the night before? What do I need with me? Same thing for showings. When we go, okay, we're going to meet outside. The first house, I'm going to try to make the longest period of time, or we're going to meet 15 minutes before our showing starts so I can talk about what to expect, what I do, what they do. All of those things are systems. All of those things will help build your confidence, make things easier, smoother, more predictable. And that way you can relay that message to your clients or your co-broke. Here's what's going to happen. And then this is going to happen. And then this is going to happen. If you're on a team, to be able to say, okay, I have an assistant. Her name is Liz. She will be reaching out to you tomorrow. We're so excited about the accepted offer. She's going to send over the important dates and deadlines to make sure we're on the same page and that our numbers match. Please send over the instructions for earnest money. I will be in touch regarding inspection. That's just a standard system I have. FYI, here's who you're going to hear from. This is what's going to happen next. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's what you're going to do. All of that is systems. You just help people like plug into it. They don't have to think about it. They don't have to try really hard. They don't have to wonder what's going on. You don't have to rethink everything every time. It's just there in place. So it's these really basic things. You know, we've got models in place for how to run your business: economic, lead generation, budget, organizational models. But beyond that, there's these small things that happen throughout a transaction or on a daily basis. And having systems in place will make that so much easier, will help you handle a higher volume of clients in a quality way, will help you not forget things or wake up in the middle of the night panicked because you forgot something, right? It just makes you feel less crazy. It makes you feel more in control. And then when you do have multiple people under contract, you can also continue to generate new business. Working in your business can become all consuming, and then you forget to work on your business. And the next thing you know, you either have quite a bit going on and no systems in place because you didn't work on your business in that designated time in your week, or you've gotten all the way through these closings. Yay, I have checks now, except for I have no new clients and nobody active. And then you have to build that back up again. And that's when you get that roller coaster of income that nobody wants. You want to keep it even. You've got to have those systems in place to allow yourself time to service your clients at an excellent level and also service your business at a high level so that you can continue to bring in new business and continue to grow and set things in place for your business and keep that foundation really strong. So if you have a project to set up your systems and you would like some accountability to that, send me a text. I will set up an accountability call with you. Tom, I know I have to get back to you as well. And Reagan, I don't think you're on the call, but anybody else, let me know. It's just a 20 to 30 minute call. And this is for accountability. So this is if you've set goals in place and you want to check in about how that's going. If you've set a project in place and you want accountability to say, this week I will have this done. That's what I'm here for. So text me to set up a time. I'm usually about a week out for scheduling, and we'll set that up. I'd love to hear from you. All right. Thanks everybody for coming on a
Thanks.
snow day. Safe travels if you have to get out there, or be careful if you're shoveling. And if you can hunker down and just have a cozy day and get some work done, great.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thanks,
You're
Amanda.
welcome. Take
As
care.
always, thank you.